I'm all for more Torah education, but it can't just be about rules. The common denominator has to be we're all trying to get close to Hashem.
They teach it in a way that they shove it down your throat. They just need to redo their curriculum so that Jews actually enjoy it and learn about Judaism and how beautiful it is.
This looks awful. We will win, but they will still hate us. At the end of the day, it comes down to Hashem, and it gives me, as a secular Jew, comfort. I know that we're going to be okay.
Welcome, everybody. Here we are, the first episode ever of Two Jews, One Opinion, an awesome podcast where I get to speak to awesome people and find out that yes, we Jews have many opinions, but they're not all different. Sometimes we actually agree on things. That's my goal. I guess I'll introduce this. I've got awesome guests today, Marc and Jordana. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for coming on. I had to pick somebody that I knew would kill it for the first episode, so I've got you both. Marc, marketer extraordinaire and a good friend. Know everything about marketing, founder of Minnesotans Against Terror, and founder of Avigdor, who's our sponsor for this show. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Jordana, anchor WCCO, can talk about anything with anybody, and that's definitely what you want on a podcast.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I also want to mention thank you so much to Wisdom Gaming for hosting us in this awesome studio. Thank you to our man Stefan back there and Jorge for helping us producing. You guys are the best. I guess I'll introduce this conversation. I was just in Israel last week, and we'll call this a tale of two cabs. You love Israeli cab drivers, right? I love Israeli cab drivers. They don't know who you are. They'll tell you everything about their life, their opinion. They'll tell you what to think. It's great. I get in a cab. First guy's there. He's giving it to me. What are you doing in America? You need to live in Israel. You lazy Americans. You just like your money. You're too comfortable. Of course, in rapid Hebrew, but I understood him. You need to be here in Israel. What are you doing in America? I tried making excuses. He wouldn't buy any of it. You guys all have to be here. That was my first cab. A couple days later, I'm in a cab, Israeli cab driver. He says, "You live in America?" He says, "Save yourselves. Stay there. Don't come here." He says, "Here in Israel, nobody gets along. Everybody hates each other. The Sephardim can't stand the Ashkenazim. The Haredim can't get along with the Chilonim. In America, people get along." So here I am, two cab drivers in Israel, and I don't know who to listen to. Do I listen to the first guy? We all got to get to Israel now. I listen to the second guy, stay in America because we can get along, right? I think the message for me is, let's take what we have here in America, the ability to get along, the ability to not be so political as Jews with every little thing. We have that freedom and luxury in America to talk amongst Jews, different types of Jews. Let's take that and maybe bring it with us to Israel. I think that's a good goal. So my effort in this goal is Two Jews, One Opinion. Let's try to see and demonstrate how Jews of different backgrounds could talk to each other, could get along, and maybe we'll bring it back to Israel, and we'll have the best of both worlds. That's my goal. You on board?
Yes,
on board.
for sure.
Okay, absolutely. Well, let's just start by introducing who we're talking to over here. Got Marc Grossfield, Jordana Green. You are a couple.
We are. We're married. Yes.
You are married. Why don't you tell us your name and a little bit about yourself and why you're happy to be here today?
So I've been in marketing all my life. I have helped many multinational companies, international companies, solve marketing problems that their ad agencies could not solve. That was my business for 20 years. I sold that business to a public company. I bought half of a baby safety products company. I grew that about tenfold and sold that to a private equity company. And then I've been doing marketing consulting ever since. In between all of that, I founded Avigdor, which is made in Israel. It's a very spiritual product. I had some help by Eddie Phillips, who's Dean's father. He passed away 2011, I think, before I was able to launch it. And now I'm a member of the community. I grew up secular. I grew up eating bacon cheeseburgers.
Are they good?
They're great, great.
I can't say I've had the experience.
Well, now you can have them vegan and kosher.
There you go. I got to try that one time.
And I went to a lunch and learn many years ago at the invitation of Ken Fink, and I was fascinated with what I learned in the Talmud on Parsha Mishpatim. And that brought me back in, and I feel I have a lot of feelings about the Jewish education system. I'm excited to talk to you about many
Absolutely.
things.
One thing that I have noticed about you is you've always been able to take your marketing and use it in the Jewish sense. I mean, Aviv, the whole brand is like Jews and marketing, but I want to talk about later is kind of how to use your marketing sense, your marketing skill to market the Jewish people.
Yes.
You know,
I'd love to
but
do
we'll
that.
talk about that.
Yes, we need that. He would
Yes.
be great at that.
Yes.
And he has many ideas for that already.
Jordana, why don't you tell us about yourself, introduce yourself, and why you're happy to be here?
Well, thank you, Rabbi. I am Marc's wife, and I am a radio talk show host on WCCO Radio in the Twin Cities. I am a news anchor and reporter. Before that, I was a reporter my whole career, born and raised in New Jersey, but I've been in Minnesota for 20 years, so my children were born here, so I definitely consider it home, and that's where I met Marc.
Sure.
We met on J-Date, incidentally,
Oh, cool.
Jewish
I
dating service.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, J-Date online. And
They're not
yeah.
a sponsor yet.
They are not a sponsor yet. Hopefully they'll get on
Yes,
board. They'll
yes.
see how enlightening this is. Hopefully they'll get on board. Two-time cancer survivor and a member of the community here. And I grew up somewhat religious, what you would call modern Orthodox. We called it conservative in New Jersey.
Sure.
And, but you know, kosher.
So
and
many labels.
Lots of different
So
labels.
many labels.
All right, I just liked it as my brand of Judaism, but always happy to learn, and I do learn in a women's group. I learn with you and your wife.
You keep
and
on
other
coming back, so that's a
brothers.
good thing.
I keep on coming back, not just for the food, for the company and the learning. And I love being Jewish. I love being Jewish more than anybody could ever hate me for it. I've instilled that in my children with a strong sense of Zionism. I go on the radio all the time and say that I am a staunch Zionist, and I am unafraid to say that out loud, and I wear it on my sleeve every day.
Well, that's great, and I want to talk more about that as we go along. Let me ask this question: you're a marketer, you're a reporter. Is there a difference?
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
oh yeah.
So
You
you
wanna
want us to
start?
talk
How would
about
you
the
describe
difference?
the
Yeah,
difference?
oh,
Yes.
I mean, I'm trying to promote my clients' products.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to influence people to make decisions,
Okay.
either quickly or over a long period of time through awareness, and solve other marketing problems. That's my job.
Okay.
I was a reporter. Now, I was a reporter earlier in my career, and I'm a talk show host, and I think it's an interesting distinction that we need to note.
Okay.
If you're a reporter or a news anchor, you stick to the facts. You do your best to be unbiased, although humans are biased.
Sure.
We can't be unbiased. Those are just humans that are reporting. But as a talk show host, I'm paid for my opinion.
Right.
So I get to offer my opinion. So I have a strong one, and I offer it. And we work things out on the air. But I think the difference is, as a marketer, you're trying to get somebody else's agenda across. As a reporter, you're supposed to stick to the facts. And as a talk show host, it's my own agenda.
Okay, so we've got marketers, we've got reporters, we've got talk show hosts. Where do rabbi fit in?
Oh, well.
Is that like all three?
I think rabbis are more psychologists
Yeah,
than
that's
anything else.
probably.
So that means I'm supposed to be listening rather than talking. Is that the goal?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And advising.
Advising. Okay. You know, I wasn't planning on saying this, but why not? You know, let's get into it. I once heard an incredible idea, and I want to ask you both this question. When it comes to news, there's an incredible analogy. I think the Chida, an ancient rabbi from like a couple hundred years ago, said the following analogy. He said there was once a mother lion bringing up their lion cubs, and she was saying, you know, you're the lions, you're the king of the jungle. I mean, there's nobody on top of you. You can go out there, head held high, you're the top of the food chain. So they go out there feeling good about themselves, and one day they come across a village, and they see something which terrifies them. They run back to the den. They come back to the mother lion, and the mother said, what'd you see? It scared you so much. So they said, well, we saw there was a big billboard in this town, and there was this hairless animal, this hairless creature, standing on two legs that was ripping a lion in half. You lied to us. You said we were the kings of the jungle. Look. So the mother says, that billboard proves my point. You think if men routinely rip lions in half, they'd put them on a billboard? 99% of the time, if a man gets involved with a lion, the lion wins. It happened once that a man ripped a lion in half. They put it on a billboard. So the Chida says something incredible. He says, news, even if it's completely unbiased, is by definition the exception, not the rule. Something that happens all the time isn't newsworthy.
That's true.
It's not news. And the problem is, the more news we consume, the more our life is oriented around the exceptions, not the rule, the more skewed our vision actually gets. I thought that was incredibly profound.
It
That's
is.
true.
And such is the case right now with what's going on in the world of public opinion
Right.
about the war in Israel. It's a terrible, terrible reality that the world is upside down on this. They started out realizing who the good guys were,
Right.
and now they've forgotten. And they don't do the work of looking at the situation, understanding the facts of the situation, reading the articles past the first paragraph to really understand all the context. And now it's not just people, it's governments. It's a tragedy. So we can talk about that a little bit more, but that's the first thing I thought of when you mentioned that.
Jordana, you had a thought about this.
I mean, I think you're exact, and Marc is spot on that we are hearing only what the news is showing us, which are, you know, the shock factor.
Right.
You know, in news we have a saying, if it bleeds, it leads.
Right.
And that's still very true. And even though the public says, well, that's not what we want, that's what the ratings show. So that's of course, if it's sexy or weird or different or horrific, it usually leads a newscast. I think it's our responsibility, though, in this era of fake news and of agendas, and even agendas coming from the top. It's harder to be a consumer of news these days. It's hard to be a listener and a watcher and to be able to trust that what we are seeing or reading is the truth, or listening to is the truth. And it's incumbent upon the listener, the consumer of the news now, to really check facts, to question everything.
Right.
And that's a hard place to be, especially if you're a kid looking at that on social media.
I find myself training myself when I see a news story, even if it is true, what's the rule that this is an exception of? I ask that question. I'll give you an example. We had riots a couple years ago here in Minneapolis, and there was a gas station that was burnt down, right? And all you saw in the news were images of this gas station that was burned down. And I had countless friends would reach out to me and be like, whoa, Minneapolis is burning. And I'm like, there's millions of buildings in Minneapolis and one of them is on fire, right? That means all the other ones aren't.
That's true.
Right? And yes, it may be true there's one building on fire and that's a problem. But that doesn't mean that all the buildings are on fire, right? And you see news stories, even if there is a story, a horrible story, whatever it is, happens here and there, what's not being said? What hasn't made the news? And I think we need to train ourselves to ask that question. I mean, is there any advice that you can give, Jordana, to consumers of news out there that would maybe give them a better sense of what the world is?
I think was given to me as when I was a young reporter. Someone always said, consider the source. So you have to consider the source of where you're getting this from. And I'll ask, my kids challenge me or ask me, hey, I saw this on social media, they said this on TikTok. Right. And I said, what's the source? You have to, and tell me the source, then I'll tell you how accurate this is, or if you should be looking for an opposition source to find out more information about that, because sometimes it requires more digging. It's not necessarily right or wrong, there's nuance to it, which is terrible for these organizations to put things out with all of this nuance that requires us as consumers to have to dig deeper. But they do it because they have an agenda.
Yeah. And that's part of the problem. That's actually a big problem, is their agenda. We in our religion live by the Torah, the rules of the Torah. The law, our value system is based on Torah. So we are supposed to, and hopefully do, analyze situations based on our values. But that's not how people and media and governments are making decisions these days. They're making it by what the public thinks. Right. So if the public opinion is that the Palestinians are suffering, then that doesn't matter who's right or wrong. It goes to oppressed versus oppressor, oppressor versus oppressed. Right. And that's not the right way to look at the situation. So it's unfortunate right now. And now with social media, especially TikTok among the young, it's becoming more than just a problem. It's becoming more than just a problem. It's becoming its own pandemic. Right. And I'm very disturbed about it. And it's hard for even the Jews that I know, that I grew up with, my family. Sometimes they're not willing to show their Judaism. They're afraid to be Jewish because of what's going on with public opinion, and that's a problem.
Okay. Well, you're clearly not afraid to be Jewish. I mean, you're wearing clear.
Yeah. Rabbi, we're lucky. I really think that that's a privilege. We live in America. We live in St. Louis Park in Minnesota. I think there are other places where we are afraid to be Jewish. We just visited my oldest, who's studying abroad in Spain. Not so friendly to the Jews over there, and she does not wear her star on public transportation. She tucks it in. So we're just lucky here in America that we still have freedoms, that they're not coming to round us up on trains, thank God, and we still have freedom of speech, and we still have protections under this government. We're very blessed.
We are.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. And that goes to, I don't know if you were going to get into the Jewish educational system, but I'd like to talk about it.
Everything we can.
Okay, so I want to talk about that.
You want to talk about Jewish education?
Okay.
You for or against?
I have experienced a Orthodox Jewish education to a certain extent as an adult, and I experienced the secular, what I call secular Jewish education, as a kid. Okay, I hated Talmud Torah. I didn't find any value in it. They never were able to touch my heart. They were never able to show me why I should value Judaism. I tried to skip out as many classes as I could. I went to Saturday school. We called it Saturday school, where I learned how to read Hebrew. No idea what I'm reading. They only taught us to read. Right. They didn't teach us. And my kids, the same thing. My kids went to Talmud Torah. They hated it. Jordana's kids went to Talmud Torah. They hated it. They haven't been able to figure out that the beauty of Judaism needs to be taught to the children if you expect them to want to be Jewish when they're older. And that's why we've got, I believe, so much assimilation going on. As an adult, learning what I'm learning now and have been for the last 30 years, I'm fascinated by the Torah and the Talmud and the fact that our ancestors had this all figured out, a couple thousand years ago. Right. Well, God help them.
That's true.
But they actually created all these laws and still debate those laws.
So I want to ask you a pointed question.
Yeah.
There's the Kollel, there's Torah Academy, who would love to educate as many people as they can, as many Jews as they can. Why aren't more secular Jews interested in learning in Torah Academy or with the Kollel?
Well, I think that you are a product of your upbringing. And my parents moved into a Jewish neighborhood. I had many, many friends in my neighborhood growing up. I think there were 10 kids my age on my circle of 39 homes. We played together. We went to school together. We went to public school. And I think that at that time, the Jewish communities were more interested in assimilating into the American culture than standing out and being Jewish. Proud Jews, yes. But did we know anything about Judaism? Do my parents really know anything about Judaism? Right. Maybe Passover, Hanukkah, but they don't know the whole story. Right. So, it's just a problem that I would like to help solve someday, given the ability to be more influential in that area.
Okay. Jordana, I asked the question before to Marc, a pointed question. Why aren't more people, secular Jews out there, interested in going to Torah Academy? I know it's a kind of a ridiculous question, but I'm asking.
No, it isn't really, but it's too big a leap. Okay. Secular Jews that didn't grow up with learning and with praying every day or being observant, sure. It's just a bridge too far for them. It's too many rules, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I think we need the rules and we need the boundaries. Sure. I love Judaism, but I'm what you would consider probably a secular Jew or a conservative Jew, and my kids go to public school. So I think if you didn't grow up that way, it's a very hard transition and a much more. The outside world looks at it as a restricted lifestyle, and they're not willing to make that leap.
So if we were just to big picture thinking here, let's say we had a blank check by somebody. I don't know, Stefan maybe wants to write it. I don't know. But let's say we couldn't devise, let's say here in the Twin Cities, because I don't want to get too global here. If we wanted to create the proper vehicle for Jewish education that would attract, the more secular Jews who aren't, let's say, getting that education, that loving Jewish education that you talked about, that maybe isn't a bridge too far. What does that look like?
Well, we have a vehicle now. We have a school called Torah Academy. Well, and we have another one called Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah more for secular Jews. They just need to redo their curriculum. They need to redo how they teach, what they teach, so that Jews actually enjoy it and learn about Judaism and how beautiful it is, and therefore they'll want to learn more and more and more. But they teach it in a way that they shove it down your throat. They don't. I never saw a Talmud till I was probably, over 30 years old. Never saw it. Heard the word, never saw it. I think I went to services, and I've probably said Aleinu thousands of times, right? In our synagogue, we stand up, we sit down, we stand up, we sit down. No idea what we're
So what's the
doing.
solution, he's asking?
So the solution is that they need to redo the curriculum at the schools. They need to teach more like Torah Academy. And it's not all about the mitzvot, okay? Instead of shoving the mitzvahs down their throats when they're kids, teach them about the beauty of Judaism and the value system and where it comes from, rather than you have to keep kosher, you have to, daven every day, 3 times a day, and so on and so forth.
Is it a lack of awareness? Is it a lack of ability? Is it a lack of interest?
I don't know. You know what? It's kind of a sad reality, in my opinion, that the people with the money make the rules in our culture. So the people that are funding Torah Academy, the people that are funding the federation that supports these Jewish organizations, tend to be the loudest in the room and make the rules. I mean, I remember at my country club, we rebuilt our country club. You know, they assessed us thousands and thousands of dollars, and they spent I don't know how many millions of dollars building this clubhouse, and for an extra $200,000 could not build a kosher kitchen into a Jewish country club. It was actually voted on to have a kosher kitchen, but the guys with the money decided that that was absurd, and they made a revote and voted against it. It's those kinds of things. So I think the problem is that the people with the money are making the rules instead of the people with the knowledge making the rules.
I think you asked if it was education or awareness. I think the answer is both. I think this is just my opinion, and what do I know?
Sure.
But I believe that experiential Judaism will work with younger kids. It's working on college campuses at the Chabad. Chabad, there was Hillel we didn't have Chabad on campus at Syracuse University. When I went there, we would go to Hillel, and it was like a Friday night, and maybe 10 kids would show up.
Right.
Now, my daughter, who's at University of Wisconsin-Madison, they can get 200 kids for Shabbat dinner at the Chabad house on Friday night. And it's not, and the rabbi will give a dvar, so they'll get a bit of learning, 10 minutes.
Sure.
And it's not only Parsha related, it's anything experiential that's about your Judaism in the world. So they go and have dinner with people that are like them and have a kosher meal, and they get a little bit of learning. I think if Hebrew school, Talmud Torah, even the day school, if it was more experiential, like they're doing, and it's working in some of the clubs, like Jewish Student Union, NCSY has clubs after school where the rabbi will bring in sushi and they'll have a learning session.
Right.
And yeah, the kids are coming for the sushi because they're high school kids and they want something. But they're also having an educated discussion about Judaism, but stuff that affects them.
Sure.
It's not necessarily about how to play dreidel. They already know that stuff. It's about Israel, or it's about sex and the Torah, or it's about what we think of intermarriage and how they should look at dating. It's more high-level conversations, but it's, and ask the rabbi, well, what is your opinion, and a real connection between experiences in their life. And I think that's where we're going wrong.
I would love to see more of that happen, and I mean, I'd love to do what I can do to make more of that happen.
I know. We'll call you in, Rabbi, to Hopkins High School.
Please do. I'd love to speak to high school kids. It's interesting. We're talking about education and decisions that are being made. I remember a couple of years ago, the Federation commissioned a survey, a study of the Twin Cities Jewish community. I think it was with a highly reputable firm, and they had all these discoveries that they made. So there was a Zoom call with people in the community to talk about the findings. So one of the findings that they found, which isn't particularly surprising, is that intermarried families have a very low level of Jewish education for their children, right? Which would make a lot of sense. What was surprising to me and almost comical was the recommendation. So the person, says, here's the finding. We find that, intermarried families are not prioritizing Jewish education. Okay, what's the recommendation? We recommend that we market Jewish education better to intermarried families. And I was sitting there like, okay, this is like, I own a BMW dealership, and we're not selling very well in low-income neighborhoods.
Yeah.
We need to market better to those families, right?
Do they understand the absurdity of that solution?
It's absurd. It's like, but I'm trying to understand what leads someone who's a smart person and a caring person to come to that conclusion. Like, what would lead someone who's smart and cares To come to the conclusion.
Because they feel that that is a more easily surmountable problem to take on than saying, don't intermarry. You can't say to somebody, well, they think you can't say to somebody, don't intermarry. They think that's not fair. That's me telling you what to do. That's me imposing my values on you, and that's not popular or cool, and you're going to get pushback from it. So instead, they say, oh, we need to market better. Right. You're just circumventing the actual problem, but they paid a firm to give you a solution, so they had to earn their money.
Exactly.
That's it.
But I think this leads into a larger question, which is that, yes, we want to be liberal, we want to be open-minded, right? Mm-hmm. At some point, you get so open-minded that you're trying to give value and give substance to something that just doesn't have any. Like, the substance is gone, but I can't admit that there's no substance here, so I have to just talk as if it has substance, right? And pretend that there's something there when there isn't. And you know, that's the part that drives me nuts a little bit, which is like, I understand the need to be accepting and allow people to make their own choices, 100%.
Absolutely.
But at some point you have to say, if you want something substantive, you want something real, you want something lasting, I can't twist nothing into something, right? At some point you're going to have to replace nothing with something.
So did they create a marketing campaign, or did they tell people, marry Jewish? What did they do?
Probably neither.
Neither. So no solutions then, right?
Well,
that was a waste of money.
But we commissioned the study.
It was a waste of money.
But we commissioned the study.
I could have told you that, by the way. Next time, tell them to come to me. I'll tell them for free.
The other thing is, like, the name of your show, right? 2 Jews, 1 opinion.
Yeah.
Usually it's 2 Jews, 5 opinions.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, 10 Jews, 20 opinions, right? I can't count how many Jewish organizations ask us for donations. There's hundreds.
Oh, I'm guilty of that.
But the point is that even, you know, running these different educational organizations, there's like too many of them, and they're all competing with each other. And we have a small, we have 15 million Jews in the world,
right.
Maybe 5 million in the United States, maybe 40 to 60,000 in the Twin Cities.
Right.
If we would pool our resources and work together, I think that we could come up with a solution. But it seems like we're always competing. Some wealthy Jew has an idea, and it turns into an organization.
So I agree, and I feel that same way. The question is, how do we do that? How do we get to more community collaboration, you know, between nonprofits? Let's start with the cause of the problem. Why are there so many different organizations? Like, why do there have to be so many denominations? Like, why can't there just be one? Why doesn't it work?
Well, I think it's part of our culture.
Okay.
It's part of our culture. We question things. We dig into things. We find flaws with things. And then we have ideas, and we want to create an organization to promote those ideas. I mean, how many political parties are there in Israel? Not 2.
No.
What is there, 10, 12?
A lot.
Right? Okay. So it's part of our culture, and I think it's one thing that makes us great. But I think it's also something that hurts us when we don't come together. And, you know, we have too many Jews right now. We have Jewish organizations that are they Jewish? Jewish Voices for Peace?
Well,
But I'm just saying, we have like these organizations that represent our community. The public thinks that they represent our community. They don't, but they're out there representing our community and talking like they do, and then their names are in the articles, and all of a sudden the Jews think this way.
Right.
We don't.
Right.
It's a problem.
It is a problem.
And, you know, I understand there are a lot of different organizations,
Sure.
Even for the youth, you know, which program are you going to go to Israel on, or where are you going to become
Sure.
educated? I understand that. But remember, when you get in a room with somebody, a Jewish person from another part of the country, within 15 minutes you find a person that you know, that they know, then there's a common denominator. Yeah. There is still more unity than I fear that you were making it out to be. We are more unified. Everybody supports Federation. Everybody supports JCRC, JFCS. We all know those organizations. We've all been to the galas. We support the Kollel. I think there is support for all of the organizations, and yes, of course, I think we can be more collaborative, but we're pretty unified. We're a small community.
We're unified in our values.
We are unified, and we support each other.
Yeah.
So I don't know that they're competing necessarily.
It's good to know. Okay. Speaking about seeing a problem and starting an organization,
yeah.
Why don't you tell us about Minnesotans Against Terror?
So
is that for a segue?
Yeah, really. So yeah, I did that exact thing I just dissed
I had to.
I was in Jerusalem during the Intifada twice. In May of 2001, and the Intifada started in the year 2000, the second Intifada. And there are massive suicide bombings all over Israel. I went in May. I came back in December with a group, and Marc Rotenberg and I, who at that time was the general counsel for the University of Minnesota, witnessed a suicide bombing. We were the first ones to the scene. The suicide bomber blew himself up. Thank God he didn't hurt anyone else. He slipped. It was raining. It was like a monsoon. And he either slipped and triggered the suicide belt, or I don't know what, but he triggered it right before he walked into a very popular hotel. Oh, wow. So when we came back, we were paying attention to what was going on in Israel with these suicide bombings. And this is, remember, right after 9/11, and it was very easy for the journalists all over the country to call the victims of, or the perpetrators of 9/11 terrorists. Right. Okay? They're terrorists, right?
Right.
You kill innocent Americans, you're a terrorist. But if you kill innocent Jews in Israel, you're not a terrorist. You're a freedom fighter, you're a militant, you're a combatant, and they wouldn't call them what they are, terrorists. And it was actually a writer from the Wall Street Journal that actually noticed this in the Star Tribune.
Oh, wow.
And he wrote an article in, I think it was a wallstreetjournal.com, that said, aren't all suicide bombers terrorists? Not according to the Star Tribune. So that was the impetus for Marc Rotenberg, Ilan Sharon, and I to start Minnesotans Against Terrorism and call out the fact that these newspapers all over the country were biased in something that they shouldn't be biased about.
So, Marc, you started this 24 years ago. Here we are at 2024, or 23 years ago.
Very proud of
right?
it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Has the Star Tribune gotten any better? Have you had any conversations with them recently?
So, you know, at that time we were able to motivate the Star Tribune, or influence the Star Tribune, to fire their editor. That was a big deal. And we actually ended up helping write the definition of what a terrorist is. And Marc Rotenberg, because he had been on television so many times representing the University of Minnesota, was our spokesperson. I think we were on television like over 60 times all over the world, actually. So we at least did that, okay? Right. But yes, the world has turned around on us.
But what about more recently?
And more recently, you know, we tried. I did have a meeting with Suki, what's her last name? Dadarian, who's one of the senior editors at the Star Tribune. And I presented the case, Israel's case, in this war to her. But unfortunately, she didn't have any authority over the person that picks the articles that are going to be republished. For some reason, he's always picking articles from the New York Times, I know who he is, and the Associated Press, which happen to be, I believe, extremely anti-Semitic. And it's funny how anti-Semitism works in that context, because it's very subtle. Like, they'll get to the facts, but they're at the very end of the article that no one reads. So I'm hoping that I made somewhat of an influence, but it's not about me. It's just the reality is that right now the media is, in my opinion, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, and they're on the wrong side, and eventually it'll come back and bite them.
Well, Jordana, you're part of the media.
I am.
So
I'm not offended, don't worry.
Marc just called out the media
I know,
for being
right?
anti-Semitic
I should
and
be
anti-Israel.
offended.
So what are you seeing? Obviously, you're proudly Jewish on the air. What are you seeing? I guess start very locally within WCCO, you know, where you are, obviously, and then broadly speaking, what are you seeing in the media?
October 7th happened. It was a Saturday. It was Shabbat, and I went on the air on Monday, and it just laid out how I felt about this. This, of course, October 9th was still a time when the world had sympathy for the horrific massacre that was perpetrated by the Hamas terrorists and on the kibbutzim and on the Nova Music Festival. There was still sympathy for the murdered Jewish people. And there isn't anymore. My view has not changed. I was a Zionist then, I was a Zionist as a child, I am a Zionist now. I believe that Israel has a right to defend itself. I believe that Israel has a right to exist. What Marc is saying is true. The media, when you turn on CNN or MSNBC, when you turn on, when you read the Star Tribune, certainly when you read the New York Times, yes, they are demonizing Israel to the nth degree, and they don't always tell the true stories. The fact that they quote the Gaza Health Ministry as a credible source of victims is insane, that is run by a terrorist organization. And remember how I said earlier in our conversation, I tell my children, consider the source.
Sure.
This is the example when the world needs to be saying, what is the source? Oh, it's the Gaza Health Ministry? Wait a minute, that's run by Hamas? Oh, okay, we understand they're inflating their numbers. We understand why they're saying 30,000 are dead, and mostly women and children, and none of them are combatants, or none of them are Hamas. So what I try to do every day on the air is educate people about what is happening. And I talk to people in Israel all the time. But I also tell my listeners this, and I'm going to be totally honest with you. Sure. I cannot be unbiased about this situation. I am a human being, and I am a Zionist. I am a Jew. And Hamas wants every Jew dead. That's me. Right. My children could have been at that music festival. They've all learned and studied in Israel. I am not unbiased in this situation. So the way the New York Times is biased and the Star Tribune is biased, I am biased. I want Israel to win. Right. And because I'm not a reporter anymore, which the New York Times and the Star Tribune is, I get to have an opinion.
Sure.
So I tell them, I'm not biased, I'm a Zionist, this is the opinion that you're getting, this is my truth, this is what I know, or what I believe to be the truth, of course. We only are as good as our sources. Sure. But I see so much hate against Israel. I feel like I am swimming upstream. Jonah Kaplan, who is CCO TV, and I are like the only two Jewish reporters on the air in the Twin Cities really talking about this issue from the side of Israel. I get a lot of hate on the text line at WCCO Radio. They call me Genocide Jordana.
Oh, wow.
Jordana, they send me texts, why do you love murdering babies? You love spilling blood. I love that. I do not love that. I do not want innocent people to die anywhere in the world. Sure. So yes, I receive a lot of negativity, but to Minnesotans' credit, there are many Minnesotans that support Israel, that understand the truth of this situation, that know this is an existential fight for not only our survival, but between good and evil being Hamas terrorists. So there are people out there that understand that. And I hold on to that hope because there's so much negativity out there surrounding this conflict. And I have to remind even my husband sometimes, there are people out there, and we are on the right side of this conflict. But it's a struggle being on the air every day.
Yeah. You know, the Jordana mentioned the fact that, you know, there is a humanitarian crisis there. Mm-hmm. We don't want innocent people being killed. Sure. I mean, it's against everything that Judaism is about. Mm-hmm. Okay? We can't kill innocent people. Right. It's a casualty, it's a problem of war, and it's a reality of war. Israel is trying to do everything it can not to kill innocent civilians. The problem is that Hamas, I mean, people know the truth and they still blame Israel and they demonize Israel. And one of the biggest problems is social media has taken over the news, especially among the young. Right. Okay? I don't know a kid under 30 years old that watches the news or reads a newspaper anymore. They're getting all their news from now X or other TikTok sources like that. And that's where the numbers hurt us because there's, almost 2 billion Muslims in the world, and there's 15 million Jews. So if a celebrity that's being influenced by a Muslim friend of theirs and has 80 million followers, you know, I don't think there's a Jew that has 1 million followers. I mean, you know, they beat us in the numbers, right? Mm-hmm. And they post so much, and there's so many of them that our kids get inundated with, these lies about Israel. Israel is not a demon. Israel's not trying to kill babies. At the same time, they have to be able to fight Hamas and get rid of Hamas. They have to win this war. Yeah. There's no other choice. It's a matter of survival. If they lose this war, if they let Hamas live, they lose. They're not interested in killing every Hamas combatant. It's impossible. Right. They'll never get to that goal. They just have to destroy their military infrastructure, and then they have to destroy, at some point, the indoctrination of kids learning to hate and kill Jews.
Okay, so I want to talk about this because both of you have done a very good job of laying out the odds against us, and you know the numbers 2 billion versus 15 million. I mean, so there's Hamas, fine. You know that war seems winnable, right? But then there's Iran, and then there's the entire Arab world that potentially, who knows what percentage of them, but even if a small percentage of them are actually jihadists and want to kill Jews. That's way more than there are Jews in the world, right? You know, is it winnable? I mean, in the global war, you know, is it a winnable war? You know, there's the PR battle, there's the, you know, physical battle, and I mean, if we look at the history of Israel, you know, look at the history of Israel, look at the history of the Jewish people. When we've been victorious, it hasn't made sense.
Yeah.
You know?
I think to answer your question directly, and again, I'm talking about a lot of things that we learned by listening to Ron Dermer. He's so smart. Sure. And I agree with him that the war is winnable. Well, first of all, Israel has to win this war, whether the United States supports Israel in the end or not. Israel will continue and wipe out Hamas's infrastructure. Israel and the United States have made great progress in the world with peace, negotiating peace between the United Arab Emirates, the Abraham Accords. Sure. They're close to establishing peace with Saudi Arabia. That'll be the big deal. Right. That'll be a paradigm shift, because Saudi Arabia is the most powerful Arab country in the world. It's got the most powerful military. It's got the most powerful influence. The two most holy sites are in Saudi Arabia, Mecca and Medina. And they believe that Iran is a common enemy. Right. I mean, they hate Iran as much as the United States does. And if we can pull Saudi Arabia in like we did with the Abraham Accords, Morocco and Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates, I think that other nations will follow with that, and that we can really have peace. We have to have somebody running Gaza when this war is over, and it can't be Israel. Right. It has to be some Arab multinational, you know, government. It can't be the PA either, because the Palestinian Authority allows the indoctrination of kids just like Hamas does.
I want to ask a pointed question again, because that's what I like to do. You know, to this point, we've talked about, you know, geopolitical solutions and military solutions, things like that. Obviously, sorry, Mike. Obviously, I'm very religious, right? For me to look at any circumstance in the world, Jewish history, what's going on now, I'll tell you a little story. There was recently some units in the IDF started wearing patches on their uniforms with a picture of the temple on it, Beis HaMikdash, a picture of the temple. And somebody asked them why. They said, because every house we go into in Gaza, they've got a picture of the mosque on it. And if they have a picture of their mosque on every single house, we could at least have our temple on the uniform. What I want to bring out is this. To me, there's no way we can talk about what's going on without bringing in a big part, the spiritual dimension, and Hashem. And Jewish history isn't conventional. And to think that we can win this war, we can defeat the enemy simply through geopolitical means. And so, I mean, the Arabs don't look at this, the Muslims don't look at this as a conventional war. They see it as a holy war, right? Do we really think we're going to be able to fight back to win a holy war against a dedicated religious, spiritual foe with conventional means? And this is a question that I have for, you know, more secular Jews, that I'm not you specifically, but is there a point at which we can maybe recognize that there's a spiritual side to this, and it's not something which we really have much of a chance of winning in a conventional, you know, geopolitical sense? Can you talk to that?
Sure. You want me to start, or you?
Yes, please.
Okay, so, well, I agree with you, okay, but we have to do our part, okay? We can't sit home and say, God, win this war for us, right?
Correct.
So we have to do our part. And yes, we believe that God is in control. I believe that God is in control because he set up the rules of the universe, okay? He set up the physical rules and the spiritual rules, and runs the world that way.
Are you quoting the rabbi back to himself?
No, because
Did you learn that from him?
because there's different
argued about this.
there's sages that have differences of opinion on this, okay, of how God operates, okay, and that's okay, right?
Let's ask him.
Listen,
He's listening, right?
yeah.
Who's right here? May the person who's wrong be struck by a lightning bolt.
Oh, God.
Again, the beauty of the Talmud, right? We've got, you know, brilliant sages, rabbis arguing with each other that live 2,000, 3,000 years apart, right?
Of course.
So in my view, we still have to do our part. Now, the reason why I have hope is because it's not a war against Muslims. We're not fighting Muslims. We're fighting these, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not the indoctrinated.
The ideology?
The ideology, but there's another word for it. These people that have been, that believe because.
Jihadists, is that a good word?
That could be. But there's an article that was written by a woman, Ayan, as I remember her first name. It was in the Wall Street Journal actually in 2015. And she says that the problem is 3%. 3% of Muslims are the problem, okay?
What's 3% of 2 billion?
Yeah, it's a lot. That's the problem.
Right.
I mean, it's a lot of people, okay? 3% of 2 billion, 60 million. 60 million Muslims that want to kill us, okay? But the rest of the Muslim world wants to live in peace. They want to go bowling with their grandkids.
Right.
They share our values. They don't.
Jordana's shaking her head.
Yeah, I don't think the math is right, so don't put that in there, okay? Make sure you put that. I don't think it's 60 million.
I thought you just
It's
didn't like
6
bowling.
million.
Yeah, 3% times 2 billion is 60 million.
You sure?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
That's
60
a lot.
million. Yeah, it's a lot.
Okay.
It's a problem,
Seems
right?
like a lot.
It's
Two
a
and a half
problem.
times us.
But
yeah.
if you look at the evil access, okay, Iran is the problem. They fund these proxies. They fund Hamas, Islamic Jihad. They fund the Hezbollah. We need to beat these proxies first. We need to make sure that Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon. We need to get Saudi Arabia on our side. We need to get the Muslim world to accept us as who we are and live in peace among us. And it's working in 6 Arab countries, Muslim countries. It's working in a lot more countries than that, actually. You know, the few troublemakers make all the news.
Right.
But most of the Muslims have no interest in killing us.
Well,
So we have to make sure that we call it like it is.
Well, I got to ask you, last time we had a problem with the Persians when they tried to kill us, I think we read about it yesterday, right?
Yeah.
The story of Purim.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we had this genocidal maniac,
Yeah.
Haman, right?
Yeah, one guy.
One guy was going to kill us all, right? So what did we do, right? We got together and fasted and prayed for 3 days as a nation together, and then Esther went in with her diplomacy and changed everything, right? And the circumstances clearly were orchestrated by God, and everything worked out, right? So again, what I would turn to the situation like this, I say, okay, let's all get together, fast and pray for 3 days, and then let's figure out a diplomatic solution, and then hope. I mean, that's with the confidence that we're going to win, because that's our history.
Yeah.
And I'm sincere about this. Like, that's really what I think makes the most sense. And obviously, I don't think that I can just go to the vast majority of secular Jews and like say realistically, this is what we ought to be doing. There's a disconnect there. One that I think is unfortunate, because I really do wholeheartedly believe that the solution is the same way we won then, we're going to win now. Like, it's not, there is no other way. We you know, our 15 million, like, like we're not, so I guess my question to you is, like, is there anything that I can do from my perspective to get this message across? Or there's just nothing to do, or you could tell me that I'm dead wrong. But, you know, this is how I see it, right? It's a spiritual thing primarily. And yes, there are practical things that we can do. There are diplomatic things that we have to try and attempt. But to think that that's the thing that we're relying on, it's just not. It just won't work. So, but I know, like, I even feel stupid going over to some people and telling them that, because I know that it's not going to be accepted. What advice would you give me? Jordana.
I would never give you advice, Rabbi. But what I would say is this: when I am feeling at the end of my rope, when I am feeling the world is against us because I've been on social media too much, or I've gotten so much hate from the listeners, or Marc and I have had a conversation and we're watching the news and seeing how demonized Israel is becoming, that is what I hearken back to. I will learn. Or when I read the Megillah yesterday, I thought, this is such perfect timing. Purim came at the perfect time, because the miracle of Purim, I know it lasted 9 years, but then it turned around over a banquet, over the night of a banquet that Esther had with Haman and Achashverosh. So, and you know, it's funny, you say it sounds silly to go to secular Jews and say, don't worry, God's got this.
Right.
But I do that with my children, with my husband, and with myself. I say that at the end of the day, this looks awful. We are losing the war in PR. Can we ever win this war? We will win it, but we will never win it. And what I mean is, we will win. Israel will exist. The Jewish people will continue, because we have, and we always will.
Right.
But they will still hate us.
Right.
In every generation, they rise up against us. We thought it wasn't going to happen. We've lived in relative, safety since the Holocaust. We weren't alive during the Holocaust.
Right.
This is our Holocaust. This is, I mean, it's not to the same level, of course, but this is a pogrom.
Right.
This is a modern day pogrom. So we're going to win the war, meaning Israel will exist, the Jews will be safe, we will lose lives, we will lose the PR, we will never win the war of public opinion. No, the world will never love the Jews, they will never love Israel, but that's, like you, at the end of the day, it comes down to Hashem. And that's why we will win. And it gives me, as a secular Jew, comfort to know that I am a believer and I know that we're going to be okay.
That's a good answer. I agree with that. I don't think that there's a disagreement in thinking that Hashem, that God is going to be in control of everything, and that's what matters most, and the idea that we have to do our part.
Right.
Okay? If you go back to the 6-Day War, right? I don't know who the brilliant Israeli was that decided to take out all their air power, to bomb all their airports and destroy all their air power, and that's why the Israelis were able to win that war in 6 days.
Sure.
And they preemptively did this.
Right.
Okay? So once they controlled the airspace, they won the war. Now, did Hashem put that thought into that person's head? Of course. Okay,
Right.
so it's happening at the same time.
Right.
But we have free choice. We have to do our part. God's going to interject when He has to. He's going to split the sea when He has to, but He's going to let us play it out. Okay, 6 million of us died.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
did He save 6 million of us?
Right.
Okay, so are we being threatened and we should be realistic about it? Is God going to save us all? No.
Right.
But in the end, yes, God is going to make sure that the Jews influence, and they have. I mean, Christianity derived from Judaism. We share the same values. We are really the same people. Every Christian should be with us. The Christians should be saying, "Go Jews, go." Okay? I mean, that's what they should be saying, because we represent the same values. We're the same. But they don't, because they're influenced by the media and all that.
Right.
And it's just a unfortunate reality. But listen, I'm gonna digress a little bit into, if that's okay, a little
my
bit
show,
about
go
my
for it.
Minnesotans Against Terrorism
Yeah.
brain, okay? So, because I've been in marketing so many times, so many years, I've learned through marketing that people are selfish. It's just a reality. You read about how people vote. People vote with their checkbook, right? Grocery prices are too high, gas prices are too high, president's probably going to lose, okay? Prices are low, interest rates are low, the incumbent's probably going to win. People vote with their checkbook. People care about things that impact them, okay? And this is just a reality that many of my clients had to learn the hard way. Many of my clients wasted millions and millions of dollars trying to solve problems that couldn't be solved just by throwing money, advertising money at a problem. I believe that that's what the Jewish community is doing wrong right now. They're trying to influence non-Jews through education and facts. And that's not the way to do it. You have to influence people through their hearts. In this case, it's kind of a negative way of doing it. I believe that we have to instill fear into the Christian community. We have to make them aware that if the Jews weren't there, they'd be killing the Christians, just like they have in every country they go into. Study Lebanon. Study Syria. I mean, the infidels of Syria, right? I think they murdered 400,000 people. When the Houthis took over Yemen, the Houthis murdered 380,000 people. America doesn't know these numbers. And they don't care. We didn't care what was happening in Syria. We didn't care what was happening in Yemen. And Americans, we shouldn't think that they would care what's going on in Israel. Right. It doesn't impact them. But if they thought that there was a fear that this could infiltrate into America, right, and there could be a pogrom in their neighborhood, with their women being raped and their kids being burned to death, and their neighbors being beheaded, then maybe they would care.
Well, okay, but short of that happening, what's gonna
we need
what's
to do a
gonna
better
cause
job.
your average guy in Wisconsin to wake up and say, "Oh, these guys are a threat to me"?
We need to change our messaging. We do have money.
Yeah.
Okay, money buys media. We can't outnumber them.
Are you suggesting the Jews run the world?
No, I'm suggesting that the Jews have enough money to buy enough media to change the views of we live in a Christian country.
And
To change views of
and
Americans.
I suggest we stop caring. Let's stop caring what somebody in Wisconsin who doesn't care about this conflict thinks. He doesn't have skin in the game, and that's okay.
Right.
He's got to fight his own battles. This is our battle. Let's do the best we can. Let's support each other. Let's know that Hashem is in charge. We're going to be okay. Let's stop caring, because we're not going to win. They're never going to like us. We need to get over it.
That, I think, is the right attitude to have a healthy mental
State.
Yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, I can't put myself in that state.
Right.
I saw a
Do you have a
suicide
good rabbi
bomber.
that you can talk to about it?
I've experienced it firsthand. I've seen it.
Right.
It's impacted my life. And once you see it firsthand, it's different. It's different. I understand why the Israelis feel the way they do.
Right.
These are not soldiers being sent across the sea to fight a war against other soldiers in Afghanistan.
Right.
This is a war in Israel with their kids.
Right. Well, to be fair, I don't think Jordana is suggesting that we do nothing. I think Jordana is suggesting that the thing that we can do is focus on ourselves.
Yes.
And not worry about the world.
That's why I agree with her. I
Right.
agree that that's the right thing
So
to do.
let's
But
try.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
But
I'd like
I
to-
believe I have a responsibility with my marketing skills and my passion to try to do something about it. But at the end of the day, I need to be doing what Jordana's saying. I need to turn it off. And I need to realize that Hashem is in control. We're not going to change these minds. And smile and enjoy my life. And that's what our books say to do, right?
Rabbi, what's your thought on that? You asked if we could win this war. I'd like to hear what you think about
I
that.
agree with you, Jordana. I really don't think that us influencing the world, I think ultimately the world will come around, but I don't think we're going to overtly influence the world. I think our primary objective should be strengthening ourselves, strengthening our own beliefs, making sure that we are being as shining examples of moral, good people as we possibly can be.
Yes.
And then sleep well at night knowing that we've done all that we can and we're in good hands. I mean,
I sleep well at night knowing the IDF is dropping flyers. I sleep well at night knowing they're trying to get people out of Rafah before they go in their strategic mission to end Hamas. I sleep well at night knowing the IDF is doing what they can, because I know that that is the truth.
I want to add a piece to this, which I think is important. We talk about anti-Semitism, and it's a reality, and it's true, and all that. Why does anti-Semitism exist? And I know it's a big question, it's a huge question, it's a massive question. And my answer to it, and I think it informs how I think on these things. If you want to know why an anti-Semite is an anti-Semite, I think you got to go to like the chief anti-Semite ever, which is Hitler. Well, Haman was pretty bad, but the one that we know recently. He famously wrote in Mein Kampf that the Jews are the world's conscience, and he wanted to rid the world of its conscience. Ultimately, the reason why people hate us is because we represent what's good and moral in the world. When somebody is, if you have a goof off, a class bully, and they feel bad about themselves because they're not being successful, they're going to want to find a scapegoat, and they're always going to pick on the goody-goody in the class, the one who's sitting in the front getting straight A's, because they don't want to look in the mirror and face their own problems. I think that is the story of anti-Semitism throughout history. We have represented morality in the world, and we do represent morality in the world. And when people feel good about themselves, they're going to like us. When people feel bad about themselves and are looking for other people to blame, we're going to be the first ones blamed. I don't view anti-Semitism as a curse. I view it as a hidden blessing. The fact that they hate me means that I stand for something. Now, it's unpleasant. It's very difficult to deal with, right? But the day that they stopped hating me and started hating somebody else, that's the day I get really worried. Because that's the day I'm like, wait, you no longer see me as the bastion of morality in the world's conscience? I'm not the one that you want to hate, right?
Interesting.
So it's part of the package of what it means to be Jewish. On the one hand, we are the world's conscience, which means we have to stand for values. When everybody else has a certain standard, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. The downside of that package is they're going to hate us. That's just part of the reality of it. But it's not something we seek to eradicate necessarily, because as long as there are people that are looking to blame, they will blame us. We can't eradicate that. It's like built into the deep human psyche. You can't eradicate people wanting to scapegoat when they feel bad about themselves, right? What happens historically is simply the better off societies are, and the more prosperity there is in the world, the less anti-Semitism there is, because people have no reason to hate. The more turmoil there is in the world, and the more dysfunction, and the more people are looking for scapegoats, the more anti-Semitism there is. But it's not something that you can fight head on. In specific instances, you have to take precautions and measures, and we have to deal with the fallout of anti-Semitism. But the root cause of it is not something that you can take head on. And if anything, it should be, on some level, a badge of pride. You know, the fact that I'm the hated one, the fact that despicable people of the world hate me, that's a good thing. They're going to hate somebody, and they're going to pick the one that they know is the one that stands for the most goodness. You know, so how do we respond to that? By doubling down on goodness. Like, that's our job. Just double down on goodness. Be the moral example. And hopefully what ends up happening is one of two things. Self-destructive societies ultimately self-destruct. And then also people who are self-destructive at some point can come around and correct their ways. Either one of those will end up with us being in a better place. Can we influence that directly? Largely not. Can we protect ourselves? Absolutely, we must, right? So, you know, that's how I view it. Protect ourselves, and let them burn themselves out, or see the light.
And I'm very happy to hear you say that.
Yeah, me too.
But that's what I hope all rabbis would say.
Okay.
Okay, because I mean, if you look at God's plan, okay, He took us from slavery, instilled His Torah in us, and made us His messengers to spread that word, right?
Right.
That's our job.
Right.
And you're at the core of that job.
Yeah.
If there aren't rabbis like you studying and teaching Torah, then there is nothing. There's no line. There's no Judaism. It's not going to spread anywhere, because the Jews and Christians tend to get less religious every decade, right? Every century. It's sad, and we need to bring Jews back in. In terms of anti-Semitism, I think there's a lot of reasons. I think that you're right, that they look at us as being self-righteous, and nobody likes a person that thinks they're more righteous than themselves. You know, who is that person? What the arrogance that they have to think that they're better than us, that they're smarter than us. I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think that depending on where you live in the world, you have anti-Semitism for different reasons. I mean, if you go back to the fact that they think we killed Christ, the fact that we don't accept Christ as a God is another reason that they hate us. If you ask Hezbollah, the leader of Hezbollah, he'll probably have a different reason than the leader of Hamas. Right. They stole my great-grandpa's land. Yeah. They killed my mother. Right. They're going to have a different reason for hating the Jews. Jews stand for democracy. If you look at the totalitarian world of Arab kingdoms, monarchies that still run the 22 Arab countries, I think it's 21 or 22 Arab countries, they're totalitarian regimes. The Jews represent democracy. 12 parties in Israel, right? Two-party system, which is not working here. Democracy is not working so good. But the last thing that they need is for democracy to take hold in a Muslim country, to the extent that it influences the people in their countries to rise up against them.
You know Churchill's line about democracy, right?
What?
He said democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others.
Yeah.
No,
ours isn't working so good.
I know.
Ours is a nightmare.
But it's better than the others.
It's better than the others.
It's the worst form of government,
Yeah.
except for all the others. We've talked a lot about the global Jews, rest of the world. Let's talk intra-Jewish here, okay? Let's start with the kind of the bigger picture within Jews. The name of the podcast, right? Obviously, many different streams, many different thoughts. Practically, what can we do? What can be done to get people closer together? But I want to ask a more specific question. Why do you think there is a hesitancy from different sides of the spectrum to kind of come together in a real way?
Are you talking about Jews or
Jews? I'm within Jews, yeah.
And when you say in a real way, like in which way do you mean? Do you mean in education or in?
Just in communal engagement, just even being friends. There tends to be a lot of segregation, a lot of isolation. People tend to stick to their own cliques. How much is that a problem? Let's start with that. How much is that a problem? And secondly, is there anything that we can do to open things up a little bit? I mean, obviously, people have to be free to live the lives they want to live. To make other people live lives they don't want to live. First of all, you can't do it. But second of all, it's not an ideal. Are we just doomed to this kind of fractionalized society where everybody's doing their own thing and you have 16 different denominations of Jews, and or is there a way to where we can kind of merge together, gloss over those differences, mend fences? I think it's an important question to ask.
This is an interesting question that I talk about with many of my girlfriends, because many of my girlfriends are at my level of religiosity where they're kosher or their husband's daven or what have you, but at Shabbat dinner, but maybe they drive on Shabbos or they don't wear modest clothing or things like that. Secular Jews, at least I'll speak for myself and the women that I know.
Well, let me say something before you answer that. You know what the word frum means, right?
Well,
F-R-U-M?
Sneas.
Well, no.
Religious.
The U is where you are. Anybody to one side is far right. Anybody to the other side is modern.
Oh.
That's it.
Oh,
So wherever
I like
you
that.
are, that's
okay. I like that. Yeah. I
like
that.
exactly where I am. That's the best place
like
to
that.
be. And you're an extremist if you're even,
I like that.
But
I think that secular Jews, and like I said, I'll speak from my perspective and the women that I have talked about this with, they don't want the rules. They don't want somebody to tell them how to dress. They don't want somebody to tell them when they can and can't drive in their car, when they can or can't go shopping. They don't want somebody to tell them to stay home or make certain meals, and they see it as restrictive. And I'm just being totally honest with you. I see it's a beautiful religion, but I'm not Shomer Shabbos for that reason. I wanted my kids, for example, to participate in sports in their communities. And that's what they do on the weekends. And I do believe if you are Shomer Shabbos, there are many things your children or you will not be able to participate in American culture. So somebody like me, I'm trying to blend the two. And I know it's pick and choose, and it's maybe not what Hashem would have liked or likes, but we have rules in my house. Like, you're home for Shabbat dinner, but on Saturday you can do what you want to do. So I think that it's too hard for people. They don't like rules, and they don't like somebody telling them, meaning Hashem or the rules of Orthodox Judaism, what to do. I think they think it's too hard. My mother always said growing up, being a Jew is hard. This is when I couldn't go to the Rocky Road Dude Ranch when I was a kid because it fell on Passover, so I couldn't go. Or I couldn't go to someone's barbecue unless I brought my own hot dog wrapped in tinfoil to put on their barbecue because I was kosher. So, there are things that I missed out on as a kid, and I get that. And maybe growing up with more religious parents, when you have your own kids, you think, I don't want my kids to miss out on the things and feel other. I've never had a McDonald's hamburger. And people think that that's insane. And I'm okay with it now, but I never have. But people think I'm an alien because of that. So a lot of us don't want our kids to be looked at that way, and that's why we've made that choice.
So, can I tell you something that might surprise you?
Yes, please. You have had a McDonald's hamburger? Because that would surprise me.
I think she's had one. She's had one. It was in Jerusalem.
Oh, okay. That doesn't
Maybe
count.
on Ben Yehuda Street, yeah.
There's people that are more religious than me. Plenty of people that are more religious than me. There are people out there that wouldn't eat in my house, right?
Really?
There are standards of behavior and observance that exist in the world that I'm not up to. I'm not holding by.
But is it your goal to get there?
No.
Okay.
But it's something that I respect. I once asked my father the following question, and I think this is important. I asked my father, I said, how do you deal with, talking about kiruv, bringing people closer. My father's been doing this his whole career. And I said, what's your goal with people? You were working with people, what's your goal? So he says, I just want to take a person where they are and help them take the next step towards Hashem. Wherever that is, whatever that is. I understand what you're saying, that if the expectation, I think a lot of people are guilty of this, it's like, well, unless you keep X, Y, and Z, right, then you're less than, or you're judged, or whatever. I think what people fail to appreciate is that you'd be no different if you were born into that circumstance. Like, like if you were born in that family, you'd be exactly the same way. So it's not a question of a person's worth or anything like that. There are objective standards that Hashem has, and then there's subjective standards that He reasonably expects for everybody. And only we know what Hashem can reasonably expect from us subjectively. Objectively, there's a book, sure. Is anybody doing everything they're supposed to all the time? I think the Talmud says there are 4 people in history who ever did everything right all the time.
Really?
Okay, so I'm not one of the 4 listed there. Spoiler alert. I'm not one of the 4. None of us do everything we're supposed to all the time. The question is this: is there an objection to getting closer?
No, in fact,
No.
we talked about why, and we're talking about what. What can we do? Okay, to bring I think the original question was, what can we do to bring the Jews together, right? To bring them closer together, right? I think Jordana's right. I know she's right about. I lived in that world where, I felt judged by the Orthodox community. I'm not a real Jew because I'm not keeping kosher and Shomer Shabbos, okay?
Right.
And I think that's a problem because it's not real. Right. Any Orthodox Jew that is judging hasn't studied enough Torah. There's only one judge, right? But in terms of what we can do, we just went to a concert, Matisyahu concert.
Yes.
And it was fantastic. And the reason why I loved it so much, I like his music. I don't have any of his albums.
Right.
I don't listen to his music regularly. What I loved about the concert was that every type of Jew was there.
Right.
We were all there.
And non-Jews were there too.
And non-Jews too.
Right.
But you could see there were Jews with kippot, okay? There were Jews with yarmulkes. There were Jews that, no yarmulkes. There were Jews from every part of the Jewish community of the Twin Cities there. Right. We need to have more of that. Okay. We need to have more get-togethers where everybody wants to come.
But the Orthodox aren't going to go to that.
Well, I want to give you my perspective on that. I think it's nice. I think it's wonderful if Jews of different types can get together. I don't think it's fundamentally meaningful. In other words, what makes us Jewish, what our mission here is to get closer to Hashem. Like, it's not about getting closer to each other, it's about getting closer to Hashem in the process. If you told me that there was Jews of all types getting together to daven at the Kosel, or getting together to light Shabbos candles, or getting together to put on tefillin, that's something I would be excited about, right? To go to a concert, okay, it's not bad, but is that getting us closer where we need to be? And I think what happens a lot in these conversations, and this is the point I think which, again, I can only speak for myself, unity for the sake of unity, which actually doesn't bring us closer to our collective mission, which is to get close to Hashem, to me, it's nice, but it's not ultimately going to change anything.
But we can interject. We can interject those parts. I wasn't suggesting that we have a Matisyahu concert every week.
Yeah.
But what I'm suggesting,
it's wonderful. Yeah.
What I'm suggesting is that we find ways to get together, where all of us want to get together.
Correct.
And we're not coming because we feel obligated to. We're coming because we want to. Right. Too many times we get together because we feel obligated to.
Right.
But there is a line, Rabbi, and I'm just going to drop a hard truth here because we're speaking frankly.
That's what I want to have.
I think that from the perspective of someone more secular, for those of us that have taken a couple of steps, it comes to a line. I'm going to give you an example.
Sure.
If something bad happens to somebody, let's say they get sick, or something bad happens. If a rabbi says to them, you might want to check the mezuzahs on your house and make sure that they're in the proper alignment, that's going to be a non-starter for a lot of people. Right. Because we don't want to think of Judaism as voodoo or as magical thinking. I also, and this is coming from me personally, I don't want it to be transactional. Right. Well, Hashem, if I do this for you, then you'll do this for me. Right. And I don't think that's how Judaism works.
Right. No.
And yet, sometimes it feels that way. So some of the women that I learned with have had an experience where somebody will tell them, well, if you keep Shabbat, or if you cover your hair, or if you dress nias, then maybe something better will happen in your life, and that makes it transactional. And maybe I have a limited understanding of how that works, but I'm just being honest with you that that's the feedback I have gotten from friends, and I have felt personally. I got to be honest.
No, and I'm glad you bring that up. Rav Hirsch actually talks about this. Sensible Hirsch lived in the 1800s, 1830s in Germany, and he was fighting a very secular German Jewry at the time, and he placed a lot of blame on the previous generations of Orthodox Jews for allowing the next generation to become totally secular and leave Judaism behind. And what he basically writes, he writes this in his book, 19 Letters, he says that Orthodox Judaism had become one of two things. It was either rules, things that you do by rote with just dryly sense of duty and obligation, or it was like transactional, mystical, magical stuff that was totally detached from the world. And usually in like the more Hasidic circles, it became that, and it was all just like mystical and magical. And the more non-Hasidic circles, it was more just like dry and dutiful, and like this is what God expects of us, without any of the beauty, any of the wealth, any of the wholesomeness of it. And Rav Hirsch writes, like, it's our job in our generation to teach authentic Judaism again in a way where it's not transactional, it's not obligatory, it's not mystical and magical, it's real, it's human, it's deep, it speaks to people's emotions. It's something that we can live with and that could also inspire us, you know? The part that hurts me is that I've learned enough to where the beauty is all there. Like all of the human things that people struggle with and look for answers, the answers are all in the Torah. The answers are all through the mitzvahs. But you're right. If it's just, check your mezuzah, or if it's just, you better show up on time to davening 3 times a day, and without any of the heart of it, it's like he said, it's like the body of the Torah without the neshama of it, without the soul of it. There's a beautiful, beautiful vision, I guess a dream that Rav Hirsch had, that he describes, and I kind of wish we can get back to this. He says he describes this vision. He's traveling, and this old man comes to him and takes him to a village. And in the village, he sees a bunch of young people dancing around, prancing gaily with these thin little walking sticks, brightly decorated, and they're looking like they're having a great time. So this old man says to Rav Hirsch, he says, "What do you see here?" He says, "Well, I see these kids having a good time, but those sticks, they're flimsy. The second they have to lean on them, they'll snap." So he says, "Well, let me show you something else." And he takes him to a corner, and there's a bunch of old people sleeping with these thick sticks that are covered in dirt and grime and dust and cobwebs. And he says, "What do you see here?" He says, I see thick sticks that can support somebody, but they're not attractive at all." So he says, "So what's your job?" So he says, "Well, my job is to take thick sticks from the old men, polish them up, and give them to the young people." Mm-hmm. Like, that's the job. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I see that as being my role. Like, my role is whatever solutions people are finding that may be attractive aren't very sturdy and solid and stable. I mean, the things that people are finding in today's world to find meaning in, to find causes in, and people want causes, and that's a good thing. Like, people are actually driven by meaning. But the things that they're finding are weak at best and laughable at worst, right? The Torah is as solid and stable as it gets. Mm-hmm. The problem is it's become unattractive because, like you said, it's either mystical and magical or it's just a bunch of rules and obligations. I try to give over, when we talked about education, giving over the heart of things, I try to do that. I try to, where it's not, I think it's unfortunate even within the Orthodox community, there are many people who, even if that are observant, it's either mystical, magical, or dutiful and obligations and rules. And some people like those rules and therefore they stick to them, and some people like the mystical, magical stuff and they stick to that too. I don't think either one of those two things is going to be very sustainable, projecting out. So, from my perspective, as long as people want to grow, as long as people aren't afraid of getting closer to Hashem, it's perfectly all right if somebody wants and demands a Judaism that makes sense, a Judaism that touches them. Don't just tell me what to do. Explain to me why. And tell me why. Why does this make sense? Don't just tell me, well, just trust me. This is what it says in this book. If you check your mezuzahs or wear that or do this, that's 100% reasonable, and that's what I would expect people to say, right? Where I think people aren't into it is that either they run into people who aren't willing to accept that, and they just turn back and say, well, don't ask questions and just accept it, or they don't have the ability to understand and empathize with people and understand where they're coming from and what really makes them tick and what motivates them. So what I would love to see more of is an openness on the part of people who maybe are more secular to getting close to Hashem, and then an understanding and an acceptance of the people who maybe are more observant, that you have no appreciation for people's journeys, where they're coming from, and you have no appreciation for what it means to try to adopt or adapt to systems that are totally foreign to you, that make no sense, right? If you can appreciate that somebody wants to get closer to Hashem, but has to do it in a way that makes sense to them, then I think there's what to talk about. Then I think there can be a merger. There can be more of a connection.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
It was. I started studying 30 years ago or so with Rabbi Leaf, Moshe Tuvia Leaf.
Yes.
And I said, Rabbi, I live, 8 miles away. I want to come to shul. I want to come on Shabbos. He says, I know what you're going to ask me. Just make sure you walk in.
Oh.
Okay? And it hit me, and I thought of it now because, Jordana says, well, I'm not Shomer Shabbos. Jordana is Shomer Shabbos in my opinion.
But I'm not.
I'm Shomer Shabbos in my opinion.
Right.
We're not to the extent of the Orthodox community, okay? But we're living our lives in a way that Hashem wants us to live, I believe, by being honest. We happen to keep kosher. It's the judging, it's the ego that we're not supposed to have influencing us that's causing the problems. In Israel, the different Orthodox sects, how do I say that? The Haredis, and the, what are the Satmars? Satmars.
The Satmars aren't in Israel.
They're judging.
They don't go to Israel.
They're judging each other. They're not supposed to be judging each other. You know what I'm saying,
They
right?
say go to Israel. It's like it. Yeah.
They're not supposed to be judging each other. You started our conversation with, should we live here or should we live in Israel?
Right.
The Jews need both of us.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
We need the Israelis, right? And we need the American Jews to make sure America keeps supporting Israel.
Right.
We need the Jordanas. We need the Marc Grossfields. We need the
Rabbi Goldbergers.
We need the Rabbi. Now, in 2003, I was honored by one of our organizations, and I was able to make a speech. And I said in the speech, I was talking about Dan Avi, God rest his soul. He just passed away last week.
Yeah.
He was my trainer. And he told me that I had to work out 6 days a week and not eat any carbs. And he was the ultimate trainer. He's 280 pounds of steel.
Right.
Didn't have an ounce of fat on him. And I didn't work out 6 days a week.
Right.
I didn't just eat carbs. He still loved me. It's his job to tell me that. It's your job to tell us this. Right? But you're still going to love us if we don't check our mezuzahs. And you're still going to love us if we happen to drive to shul, right? Because you can't judge either, right?
Right.
So I think we all have our part. And I think that that's important. And I think that's the way Hashem designed us.
Wouldn't a better trainer, though, instead of saying you need to work out 6 times a week, wouldn't a better trainer say, Mark, I know you're only going to do 2, so do 2?
It's a bit unrealistic.
Listen, your job is to tell us to do more mitzvahs.
Right.
And our job is to listen to you and apply them the way that we can and feel work for us. That's how I feel. Now, you're not supposed to feel that way. Your job is to say, no, Mark, You need to do the mitzvahs. You need to wear the tzitzis.
Let me tell you something Rav actually writes, and I think this is quite profound. He says there's a big difference between judging an action and judging a person. You know, what happens all too often in our world is that because we don't want to be judgmental, therefore we can't have any standards, right? And therefore anything goes, right? How could I possibly say that this is wrong, right? You know, Rav says the following thing. He says anybody can say whether an action is right or wrong in a vacuum. We have a Torah. Torah says these actions are right, these actions are wrong. What you can't do is judge a person based on his actions, because you have no idea what that person's circumstances are, what they're coming from, how difficult a particular action is, how reasonable it is to expect them to perform that action. Like I said, I don't do everything right either. You know, no one does everything right. But on the other flip side of that is there has to be some objective measure of what's acceptable, what's good behavior, what's not good behavior. So I think there have to be two standards. One, like Rav says, an action, you can say it's good or bad. A person, you can't judge a person based on their actions. You have no idea who the person is, right? So for example, if I would say, well, driving a car on Shabbos is not something that Hashem wants. That's a statement. Now, that doesn't mean that a person who drives on Shabbos is a worse person than a specific person who doesn't drive on Shabbos, right? Because we have no idea what it means for that person to drive, what the struggle is for that person. So I think there's two sides to this coin. Some people have to understand that you can't judge people based on their actions. And other people, I think, have to understand that actions can be judged, whether they're objectionably right or wrong. Now, does that mean that I'm going to beat myself up because I'm not doing something that I should be doing? We all have things that we should be doing that we're not doing. This is why we're Jewish. This is why we feel guilty, right?
That's true.
I mean, that's what Jewish guilt is.
That's true.
And if there aren't actions that we think we should be doing that we're not doing, or there aren't things that we're doing that we think we shouldn't be doing, then we're not doing our job, right? You know, in the world, guilt is a very uncomfortable feeling. It's very uncomfortable. You know what guilt is, right? Guilt is when my actions are here, right? And my expectation of where I should behave is here, right? It's very uncomfortable. There's two ways to deal with it. One way is to lower my expectation, right? The other way is to embrace the guilt. That's what Jews do, right? We don't lower our expectation to fit our actions, right?
No.
We maintain the expectation, all the while not living up to it, and then
Feel bad about it.
which is amazing. One of my favorite stories ever, and I've told this to you, Marc, favorite stories ever, guy calls up his rabbi, he says, Rabbi, I haven't learned a word in 3 days, I feel horrible. The rabbi says, that's amazing, come over, we'll have a l'chaim. He says, Rabbi, you didn't hear me. I said, I haven't learned in 3 days, I feel horrible. He says, that's amazing, I heard you. He's like, what are you talking about? He says, tell me, how many people in this world feel horrible if they haven't learned for 3 days? He says, that's a reason to celebrate, right? If there's one thing I want to change, these two things. On the one hand, people need to learn not to judge people based on their actions. You can't possibly do that because you have no idea what a person's going through, where they're coming from. You can't appreciate that person. On the flip side, we can judge actions. And just because I tell you an action is something that not my own personal opinion, just because I say Hashem doesn't want someone doing this action, doesn't mean I'm judging the person, right? And doesn't mean that that person is any less. What does it mean? So you feel guilty about it. Is that a bad thing? It's uncomfortable. Is it bad? Is it bad for someone to feel guilty about driving on Shabbos?
Bad? No.
No. No.
And that person knows what their struggle is. We all have those things. That's my point. So I think the ultimate goal, we all want to get closer to Hashem from wherever we're coming from, right? Not judging people is incredibly important. But not being afraid to judge your actions. And not being afraid to say, yeah, I know that I'm not living up to what Hashem ultimately wants me to do. That doesn't make me a bad person. It means I have things to grow. It means I have things to do. And it may make me feel more guilty. And I think maybe part of the reason why people want to avoid it is because they don't like feeling guilty. Right? It's the guilt. So instinctively we try to say and justify our behavior. We try to say, you know, I don't want to feel guilty about it. Therefore, you know, Hashem really wants me to drive on Shabbos. You know, something like that. There's nothing wrong with feeling guilty. Feeling guilty should be a badge of pride. What it says is I have standards. And even if I don't live up to the standards, right, at least I have them. That's way better than somebody who lowers the standards because they don't want to feel guilt.
I like it. We quote you all the time, by the way. Marc told me that story about the
It's a
l'chaim.
great story.
And whenever my kids do something wrong and they feel bad about it, I say, Rabbi Goldberger says we should do a l'chaim because you feel bad.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good one. You know, it all comes back, while you were talking about that, it all comes back to Jewish education. It all comes back to that. You know, we have close friends of ours and other friends. I'm going to talk about the other friends because if they watch this, they would probably know if I'm talking about them. My close friends, okay?
This is going totally viral.
Well, don't out
Okay.
us, babe. I mean,
So-
don't get us shunned from the community.
So I see friends of mine embarrassing, talking down to their children in front of me that embarrasses their children. I have friends of mine whose wives belittle their husbands in front of other people, okay? And I see lots of other things like that. I'm just going to stick with that for now to make this point. And the first thing I think of is, if they had just studied Torah, their relationship would be so richer because they would be supporting their wives and their kids instead of competing with them because it's their ego that's making them angry. How dare you talk to me this way? How dare you say that, right? And so forth. So it all comes back to education. If we can invest, if our community can invest in Jewish education, you're not going to get the secular community to come to Torah Academy. But if we on the secular side, if we can find a way to instill the love of Judaism into our kids so that they want to learn Torah in some way and change their behavior so they don't talk down to their kids and they don't talk down to their spouses and embarrass them in front of people, the Torah says it's like stabbing them in the back.
Right.
But it all starts to me with the education
So
system.
the three of us right now, let's go change the world.
So, but Rabbi, what would you say?
Yeah.
Because right now we don't have a magic wand, unfortunately, and we can't create a new educational system. So what would you tell secular folks about having the kids become closer to Hashem? I mean, that's the one opinion, right? We all want to get closer. How do we get there?
I understand the challenge. I understand why people are hesitant to do it. The people who have, called the guts, I guess, to allow their children to live a lifestyle that maybe makes them feel guilty, I have true admiration for that. You know, the more people want to educate their children based on the Torah, based on the way that Hashem wants us ultimately all to live, I think we're all better off for it. You know, obviously that education can't come with condemnation. It can't come with judgment. It's a delicate thing. It's a very delicate thing. I've seen people do it well, and I've seen people do it horribly. You know, I mean, I've seen this many times growing up in Atlanta. I've seen children become more religious than their parents. You remember, what's his name? By Barry, I forget his name now. Wolf, sorry, Barry Wolf. Barry Wolf was a guy in the community.
Okay.
He had an organization called PORC, Parents of Religious Kids.
Oh.
It was a whole group of people whose kids became religious, and he created a support group for the parents. He called it PORC, which is hilarious.
It's funny.
And the point was that yes, when kids become religious, oftentimes it could be an unhealthy relationship there, where, you know, the parents are, seen as less than. But I have to say, I mean, I've seen it work well. I mean, my parents are more religious than their parents. I'm all for more Torah education. I'm all for more observant education, but it can't just be about rules. It can't just be, with benchmarks and lines saying, okay, if you check these boxes, then you're considered a good Jew, and if you don't check those boxes, not. It has to be human.
Yeah.
The common denominator has to be we're all trying to get close to Hashem. Everybody, like my father said, wherever you are right now, just take one step. You know, it's not about have we all gotten to the finish line. And unfortunately, that's sometimes how it's portrayed. It's like, well, you're farther along than so and so you're more valuable. No, the question is, where did you start from, and where did you end up? And that's the question. How far did you get from your own starting point? And if you have somebody who started over here and got 3 steps forward, and somebody who started here and took 2 steps back, I mean, who's better in Hashem's eyes? The guy who started here and got 3 steps closer to Hashem, and the guy who started here and went 2 steps back. You know, even though this person may observe more, you know, may check off more boxes on the observance scale, right? So, you know, I think people need to look at observance that way, connecting to Hashem that way. It's not, again, we can measure actions. There have to be objectionable measures of actions. Is this action good in Hashem's eyes, not good in Hashem's eyes? But judging people, absolutely not. And you know, I wish there were more schools that had educators that were able to educate on this way. I've seen some excellent people in my own lifetime that were able to do this. My in-laws, my parents are excellent examples of this, of people who are able to bring people along. And I've unfortunately seen horrible examples of this, of people who turn people off because they didn't understand this. And they themselves had a very shallow, black and white view of what Judaism is. And then I think, again, it's easier for me to say this, but parents that are able to let their kids become more observant and closer to God than they are, I have tremendous respect and admiration for that. And I understand the difficulty involved. You know, I have a son now in 9th grade. You know, there's certain things that he's kind of looking at me as the non-religious one in the family now. But I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. You know, I'm thrilled that he's going in that direction. You know.
You know, I agree with you. I expect you to say that. I mean, you're a teacher. You know, you're the CEO of the Kollel. Judaism is your life. You're an observant Jew. I think the world needs observant Jews to do what they're doing. I think Judaism needs not as observant Jews to do what they're doing. And I know you'd probably wish that everybody was observant. I mean, I hope that you would think that way.
Right.
Okay? And I think that you're trying to influence us to become more observant, and that's good. We need that. Okay? But we also have to accept that we need Jews to make money. We need Jews, and yeah, you can say, well, you can make money and still be observant. I know, and it's probably the first thing you thought of, you know. But we have, and we do. You accept all of us.
Want to hear a cute story?
Yeah.
There was recently an Amazon was having a convention for its top sellers nationally, and they scheduled the convention for Shabbos.
Oh.
And they had to cancel it because 90% of the top Amazon sellers are observant Jews, Hasidim, living in New York.
Really? Oh, that's hilarious. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, you know, we have our way of influencing the world, right? I mean, if you look at the United States right now, Antony Blinken is Jewish, right? Kamala Harris, our vice president's husband, is Jewish, right? We have a lot of congressmen, people that are, right? We may be small in numbers, but we're not small in influence. And we just keep doing our part.
Right.
You keep doing your part, trying to make us more observant. We keep doing our part and becoming little by little, a little more. Jordana and I host Shabbos. We don't do it in the observant way, okay? Right. But we are teaching kids. We've been doing this now for I don't know how many years. And we'll have 12, 13, 14, 15 kids at our Shabbos, and we're teaching them Torah.
Well, how do you know what Torah to teach them?
Because I learned
from you. Thank you, Rabbi. That's right.
And I learned from you every Friday morning, and I put it into different words to teach the same lesson to the kids in a way that they'll understand it. Right. And, you know, most of them love it. They love it, you know.
Did we get to one opinion?
Do we have one opinion?
Did we get to one opinion? 2 Jews, 1 opinion?
Well, there's 3 Jews here.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What are you going to do with the show?
Yeah.
You going to have 3 Jews or 2 Jews?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
But that's part of the enigma of being Jewish, is like, you know, you answer one question with another question.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask you a question.
Please.
If Hashem was here and you asked him, what are the 3 most important mitzvahs? The 3 most important mitzvahs for a human being to do, what would they be?
I don't like the question.
You don't like the question?
No, I like it. I'll rephrase the question.
Okay.
Okay? My father once asked my grandfather, what's the biggest challenge facing the Jewish people today?
Okay.
And he said, the challenge to get out of bed in the morning.
How
That's
so?
the biggest challenge? How so?
How so?
Because ultimately, the most important battle that any individual can fight is their own internal one. And every bit of energy that we sit there worrying about global things and worrying about things that are beyond ourselves, what we really have to do is just get out of bed in the morning and do the best job that we can. And if every single one of us did that, then everything else would work out. And if we ignore our own personal battles and our day-to-day things that we have to do and try to solve all the world's problems, we're steering away from what we really have to do. So you asked me, what are the 3 most important mitzvahs, right? Any individual has to answer that question personally. And you know what it is? It's the 3 things that they're not doing that they know they should be. That's the answer. So if it's, not getting upset with your wife, or, or not speaking Lashon Hara, or, any individual person knows the answer to that question for themselves. For me to objectively sit here and say, these are the 3 most important things, and if you're not doing them, you're not. That's why I say, specific actions I can tell you good or not, but the value of a person, what I need to be working on right now, is not what you need to be working on right now, not what you need to be working on right now. And the value of me as a person is how well am I doing with the things that I need to be working on, and how well are you doing things you need to be working on, and not measuring, well, is the thing that you're working on more observant or less observant than the thing that I'm working on.
Okay,
right?
so actually I really like that answer. And now I want to rephrase my question.
Okay.
What is God going to judge us on most? In terms of what does our Torah say that God is going to judge us most on? And it doesn't have to be the first 3, it could be the first 4 or 5, but what are the key things that we're going to be judged on?
Good question, babe.
I think ultimately it's to what extent the decisions that we made in our lives were with Him in mind.
Okay.
I think that's the
And
answer.
I thought you were going to say, don't do to others as you wouldn't want done to you. I thought you were going to say raising children that are good. What are these things that I'm thinking of?
I mean, those are important principles, but the world of mitzvahs is simply a bedrock of what life looks like. How well a person performs, ultimately what a person is all about is his choices, and why you choose what you chose, as opposed to what you do. I can take 2 identical lives on the outside, and they look identical. The same observance of Shabbos, and the same amount of tzedakah, and the same amount of acts of kindness, and identical. And one person is great in the eyes of Hashem, and the other person isn't. Because one person did it because he wanted to do the right thing, because this is what Hashem wants from him, and the other person did it for selfish reasons. That's more important than what you do. Why you do what you do is more important than what you do. I think this is something which is lost on a lot of people. Now, it shouldn't be an excuse to not do things that you're supposed to do. But ultimately, what matters more than what I do is why I do it. And a person has to be honest with themselves. So, you ask me what are the most important things? It's what are the things that I'm struggling with right now? Where are the areas that I know are getting me closer to Hashem? Where are the areas that I know are taking me farther away from Hashem? That's how I look at it.
So you ask yourself, what does Hashem want from me? Is that what you're talking about?
I should be. I should be asking that every day. And I know what those things are. I know in my own mind the things that I have to work on, I'm not going to say them out loud.
Yeah, that's okay. You don't have to. It's between you and Hashem.
Yes.
Well, I'm not worried about how you're going to be judged.
I should be.
I'm not. I'm
If-
not worried about how you're going to be judged.
No,
You can
that's-
worry about
That's
it.
kind of you. But the truth is, if you asked a good person and not such a good person, if they thought they were good, who's more likely to say that yes? The good person is more likely to say, I'm probably not so good. We did cover a lot of
we
things.
did. My goodness.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great 2 hours with you. Marc and Jordana, you're the best first guest that I can possibly hope for.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We'll see where this goes. My hope is that we can have some more heartfelt, good, empathetic conversations between different Jews, like the conversations that we had. I think we came out of this even closer, though we were close before. And hopefully a lot of people watch this. Hopefully a lot of people adopt some of the stances that we adopt and realize that we can have conversations. We can have open conversations. We can talk to each other about things. We don't have to be scared that someone's going to judge me or someone's going to think a certain way about me. And ultimately could find out that 2 or 3, in this case, Jews can have one opinion. See you next episode. I'm all for more Torah education, but it can't just be about rules. If you check these boxes, then you're considered a good Jew, and if you don't check those boxes, not. The common denominator has to be we're all trying to get close to Hashem.
They teach it in a way that they shove it down your throat. They just need to redo their curriculum, redo how they teach, what they teach, so that Jews actually enjoy it and learn about Judaism and how beautiful it is.
This looks awful. We will win, but they will still hate us. At the end of the day, it comes down to Hashem, and it gives me, as a secular Jew, comfort. I know that we're going to be okay.